everybody to the Dadabase. I'm Matt Amundsen. This is Mark Petersen. This is take 2.
Right.
And here at the Dadabase, we're just trying to collect as many stories about fatherhood and experiences and stories and advice that we possibly can. I really appreciate you coming out and joining me. Cheers to you.
Cool.
School. So, you know my daughters.
Black Butte Porter. No, I'm sorry. Black Rabbit Porter.
Yeah.
Wrong part of the state.
You know my daughters.
I do.
And you helped establish the Skoll tradition of clinking glasses, making sure you look someone in the eye when you do it, especially if you can't reach them.
Right.
And finishing off the drink and setting it down. So appreciate that. Thanks.
My pleasure.
Thanks for helping guide and form their young minds. I want to start off, my favorite place to start off is talking to dads about their experiences and what they remember most about their children. What do you love best about your daughter? Or whatever you want to share.
Yeah, the thing I like about Sonia is her curiosity. The question, why? Or the question, what is this? Or when can we go? She's always looking for the next experience, and having an experience, she wants to keep having the experience that she's having. She doesn't want to move on to something else. But in school, it carried all the way through the time that I was within viewing distance, that all the other kids would go to solve a problem. They'd get the answer and they'd be done. Sonia would get the answer, and then she'd ask another question to say, so how else can we get to that answer, or is there another answer that's possible? And then she'd work on different ways of finding that other thing. And
sure.
All the way into high school, she ended up getting a math award because she was one of the kids who could always find the answer, but then she'd always go on and try to investigate. This is mostly in math. She would try to investigate something to see other ways that you could get to that same solution. And so she won the math award along with another guy who was faster at finding the answer, but then he'd stop. So the teachers of math in the upper school had never had a student like that. And, and so she's always checking around the edges for other interesting things.
Yeah.
And that's been true since she was a baby, and never wanted to leave the party until it was done. And then she'd go into her bedroom and wrestle around for a little while, but then she'd be out like a light, just faster than blazes.
Yeah, that's a common refrain. Is that she regularly will say that she doesn't like seeing people go away.
Right.
Especially when she's having a good time, and has a hard time letting go because she's having so much fun in that moment.
Yep.
That's pretty awesome. So, thinking back to the days of being a dad, what were your favorite ways of spending time with her?
Going out and exploring. Going to the park. Exploring the different climbing apparatus. Going to a bigger park and exploring along the river's edge. Nothing pops to mind as far as an experience that puts light on anything, but it's just always willing. Yeah. We were, let's see, Sonia was between the 3rd and 4th grades, and I had arranged to take a trip for the whole family east through Utah, back to Wisconsin, and then home again through Canada. And in both directions, we were going to go through dinosaur digs and look at these bones and see things like that. But on the way back, when we went up into Canada and started driving along the roads and seeing rivers alongside the roads and lakes, and got to the mountains and everything, somewhere in there, in looking at the map and looking at real life, Sonia started saying, "Oh, I know these places." And I said, "What?" And she said, "From that game we played on the Apple II called Nor'westers to the Pacific," which starts with the canoes sitting along the western bank of the Hudson Bay, and the map west of that point being blank.
Oh,
And
okay.
so here you are in a canoe with a crew, and you paddle upriver until you run into a rapids. And then you have to take your time getting around the rapids. And while you're going up the river, it's showing the map being developed as you've gone up the river.
Sure.
Then you build this little fort, continue on up the river, and the map continues to develop. And that's the map she began to see as we traveled.
Okay.
And the map that the kids drew as they played this game was the actual map of Western Canada. Really a cool game.
Yeah.
But the connection that she made from that game to actually traveling there was a surprise.
The game developers of that game would be thrilled to hear that if they're still around.
They aren't. I've looked really hard trying to find out why they haven't done this, because I think you can still play Oregon Trail.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's true. One of the things that she will often bring up is that I don't necessarily know that it would be significant, but she routinely talks about how after school, on a weekly basis, you guys would stop off at like Wendy's or Dairy Queen or one of those sorts of places and just have a burger or something like that before you headed back on home. And it's a tiny little thing, but oftentimes those tiny little things are what stand out for you.
Well, and one of the things that was going on in my head is that driving between Catlin and Selwood, there are probably about 10 or 11 different ways you can go. And I didn't like going to school in the morning was almost always the same way. There were 2 ways that we could go there, but coming home, there might be an errand to run or something, but I'd like to take different ways home. The most bizarre way to go home was up Sunset and then get off at Skyline and then wind across on Humphrey and then go down Dosh to the Beaverton Hillsdale Highway and then zigzag over. I mean, it was about as left and right as you could go, but it went by a Wendy's.
So how did having a daughter change you?
Change me?
Yeah, if at all.
I guess it made me more careful. My teenage years and on into my 20s, I don't know that I took more risks than anybody else, but I did my fair share of stupid stuff.
Sure.
And with the kid in the car, you don't do that.
Right.
And I don't mean to say that all the stupid stuff I did was in a car. There were
That's a good
few.
example. Sure.
But yeah, you'd be aware of the fact that there was somebody else that you were taking care of and that moderated your activity. The difference between driving a vehicle carefully with one kid in the back, or as I did, driving a school bus with 40 kids in the back. Almost always my concentration was on operating the vehicle carefully. It wasn't the fear that these kids back here would get hurt,
Right.
because that would be paralyzing. It was always out there looking forward and trying to make sure that we didn't get into a spot we couldn't get out of.
Right.
And a lot of people wondered how anybody can drive a bus and be responsible for all those bodies back there. And that rarely crossed my mind. It was always operate the vehicle safely,
Right.
because it's a multi-ton vehicle and can do a lot of damage beyond the bus and in the bus, you know.
Right.
But how did it change me? I think that's it. It made me more cautious and aware. That's all I can come up with.
That's
Yeah,
fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. How would you describe your approach to parenting?
Cautious oversight. I was not somebody who would tell Sonia, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this.
Right.
I would give her broad direction, like be careful or watch yourself or something. But it was, in my opinion, it's important for the kid to bear the responsibility for care. And she actually needed encouragement to be a little more daring. When we took up skiing for the first time, she rode with us on the ski bus up to Mount Hood Meadows and had skis set up for her and everything. But starting out at the top of the bunny slope with me on either side, you know, standing astride of her, a good 350 yards from the end of the slope, she was worried about the trees at the bottom. You know, this open white slope between didn't matter. I'm worried about those trees down there.
Right.
And I kept saying, you know, we can turn, we can stop, we can do all this. And it was all reassurance. But she, within, I don't know, 4 or 5 trips down the hill, she was starting to turn and do things on her own and get the confidence she needed to do. And that's what I felt needed. She was has always been somebody who wants to be good at something before she even knows how to do it. So she'd get frustrated that it wouldn't go the way she wanted it to go because she had no experience.
Right.
As she gained experience, it would become better. But still there was this ingrained frustration that she wasn't doing it just perfectly, whatever it was.
Yeah, I don't think you would have gotten very far anyway if you had taken the approach of don't do this, don't do that. It has been my experience that she doesn't respond well to those sorts of things.
Well, and she even posted something yesterday. She says it's really impressive that no one told me I couldn't do what shouldn't do what I can't do, or something
Right.
to that effect.
Don't tell me what I can't do.
Right.
Let's see here. Do you ever feel any sort of familial or societal pressure to have a son?
No. Sonia was, still is, a kind of force of nature. And that really doesn't come into my mind.
Yeah.
We tried to adopt a boy, and he was roughly the same age as Sonia at first grade level, but it just didn't work. It was kind of a mess. He was somebody who needed to be told everything to be done and how to do it and be helped to do it. And neither Kathy nor I were prepared to lead somebody step by step through every day.
Right.
So we finally gave up and turned him over to another set of parents that might be able to handle that. But that's as close as we came to. We thought it'd be good for Sonia to have a sibling, but
I understand that there was a bit of a religious aspect to that too, whereas he had been used to a pretty deeply religious
well,
involvement.
the people that he had been involved with went to church on Sunday and Wednesday night, and when he was turned over to another family, somebody reported back to us that he'd said, "Oh, good, now I can get back with a good family," or something to that effect. And oh well.
Hopefully he's doing well.
As last I heard, he's 6'4" and living well.
Yeah, I hope he's happy.
Yeah.
So tell me what you remember about your dad.
The surroundings of my childhood are probably unique. Other people will have had experiences like this, but growing up in the North Woods of Wisconsin, on a small street with 7 houses and 18 acres of woods and a lake, and having free run of everything within earshot of the house, and not having farm chores, because my dad was a pastor, still got that. And all of the families nearby were farmers, so there was always the time to go out and watch them work and everything. But as far as my dad being the preacher of the community, his office was in the house, and so he was, except when he was out on some kind of a call, he was always there reading or writing, or fixing the car or setting up the furnace to work or whatever. The mom was always there too, and she was always busy with the kitchen or doing some craft work. So the parents were always there. They were, if they were working together, they were planning something for the upcoming summer school, or working with somebody to get something going on the church, either boards or committees to buy a new organ or all sorts of stuff like that. So I saw meetings, and I saw artistic things, and I saw dancing, and I saw other than going to school, which was a one-room schoolhouse within walking distance. So we'd walk to an 8th grade one-room school to start with, and then at the at 4th grade, they subdivided some of the country schools. So our little butternut school became 3 grades, and North Star School became the next 3 grades. And then after the 6th grade, you'd go into the town school. Then in our 5th grade year, all of that was what they called integration. To them, it was integrating all the country schools into the main town school.
Okay.
And so we moved at the last part of our 5th grade year into the town school, and so started the next year in the 6th grade with 36 kids in the class. Mind you, my first grade year was 2 of us, Ronnie and me. And the next year was Ronnie and me. And then the 3rd grade year was 6 boys. And I can remember all of them. And then for the next 3 years, it was those same 6 boys. And then, boom, well, of course, with the other grades there were always girls in the other grades too. So it wasn't that we just had a boys' school. And recess was played with ages of all levels. Going back to the dad, the thing that was different about the community was that very few dads went off to work. My dad was a preacher, so he was in the house doing his work, sometimes going out and visiting people in the community.
Mm-hmm.
But the other dads, most of the people I knew, were farmers. Their mothers worked in the home and cleaning stuff in the milk house. The farmers were milking the cows or gathering crops. Everything was centered around the home.
Right.
So that everybody in that community was home-centered, and the work was there.
Right.
So the difference was that our family didn't have 38 cows to take care of and machinery to keep running and stuff to go out and do. Dad had started that way down in Nebraska with his family, and that was a farm situation, and so he knew hard work. He knew how to keep things running. And one of the earliest things that he taught me was maintenance. You know, if you're going to have a bicycle, you need to know how to fix the coaster brake. So every spring, bicycle came all apart, parts got greased and redone, etc., and put back together again. And every spring, the lawnmower had to have new bits and pieces, spark plug, and what do we got? Oh, good. So, and what was different is that us kids, if we didn't have any chores to do, would make arrangements to meet at Dean's shop, and we'd put together an ice shack for fishing in the coming winter, or we'd try to build a coaster to run down a hill or something
Sure.
like that. And Dean's dad would come by and give us advice about, you probably should drill holes in that oak before you try to nail it together. So the fathers were always around, mothers were always around. Few people who did work worked in town, which was really close. And so between always having somebody nearby to help and playing around in the woods, going out into the middle of the lake and tipping the canoe over and seeing if you can get it right back up again, and it's just all stuff we did, you know.
Sure. Well, what sort of traits do you recognize in yourself that your father had?
Impatience.
Really?
Yeah.
You're retired now. How impatient
Right.
can you be?
All right. No, there are things that I'd like to see happen, and I'd like to see them happen quicker. And that's something. And being irritated by people who don't follow through on what they say they're going to do. And of course, that you turn back on yourself. You know, pretty volcanic temper is there. Although I'm more likely to get irritated at myself for making a mistake than lashing out at somebody else, and that I saw in him. His later years, he was working on doing the sheetrock finishing in the house that they built down in California. And Mom was doing stuff in the kitchen, and Dad was putting the taping on. And she said it would be really quiet for a long time. And you'd hear the scrape of the trowel as it went across the sheetrock cement, and shh, 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 God damn it. Shh, shh, shit. And it was always down to doing a couple of smoothing runs and taking one more, and as you take the one more, the tape would follow the trowel right down.
That's pretty good.
No, there's another story about him losing his temper in the basement of the parsonage in West Denmark. The heating ducts were set up below the joists, so that it was maybe a 7-foot ceiling, and then the heating ducts dropped down below that, and they were round, so they came down to make a clearance from the floor of 6 feet or 6 feet 1 inch or something like that. And Dad was 6'2". And there was this, he had a printing area set up with the cranking machine, not rapidograph, mimeograph. And he'd produce the church bulletins down there. So he'd type them up on the stencils, and then he'd do all of the inking and everything and start doing this. But the pathway that he'd take to get from the stairs over to that spot went under one of these ducts things. And one time he bumped his bald head again and just blew up, took his fist and went boom like this and put a dent in the duct so that it would just clear his head down. So he never bumped into that thing again.
Oh man, I like that. Okay, we're going to take a very quick break. And when we come back, we'll have some more dad questions.
Oh,
We'll
okay.
getting into some other things.
I can't fucking wait.
So we're back. We were talking about traits. We were talking about impatience and volcanic temper and those sorts of things.
I got one more thing to add, though.
Sure.
The of the things that my parents taught me, not just the father, but Dad pretty much taught me not to be afraid to try things. You know, if the coal stoker was broken and could be fixed, it was a lot of work, but you'd know how to find the cotter key or whatever else that would break away when the thing would break, how to fix that. And so you'd dig in there and pull things out and get the right thing back in. And the same with the lawnmower and the cars and fixing something around the house. Anything went haywire, he'd try to tackle it first. And if it escaped him, he'd call for somebody who knew about it. But that's why I ended up building houses, is because this other guy and I, why not? It's not hard. One board at a time. And so we built 4 or 5 houses over the course of 12 years. And
That's crazy.
yeah, it was fun.
Yeah, I bet.
But that was one of the things I take from him. And the other thing I take, I got to give my mom credit for, is the creative part of things. Doing something artistic with a sign, or figuring out a different way to use materials to make a frame for a photograph, or I'd see her paint, I'd see her do silk screening, I'd see her do potato prints, I'd see her do sewing work and all these different things. You know, talk about modeling for self-determination, you know, with not afraid to try something, to be creative about things. It's just incredible childhood.
Yeah.
Go off in the woods and build a fort. And our parents never came around. We were totally on our own, as far as we know.
Right. So, with those same traits then, what sort of traits do you see in Sonia that you feel like you specifically have passed along to her?
Well, the whole business of going ahead and doing something, like the painted wall,
Right.
that's incredible. And, there's technique in what she did that Mom would not have done. But it fits the medium and the fact that she was working to do a comic book-like thing.
Right.
And
for those at home who aren't familiar with this, my wife painted this giant mural on a wall of all of these different comic book characters.
16? Or
Sounds
12?
about right. 12.
12, okay.
It's 12. Which I'm going to provide a picture here. And as you can see, there's the different characters.
And it's about this big.
Right. We're going to be overlaid with this picture.
Oh, okay.
But this is something that Sonia put together for our daughter in order to give her strong female role models. And it's just absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, it's great.
You were talking about taking things apart and trying to figure out how to fix them, like maybe the washer or dryer,
Right.
Those sorts of things. That's something that Sonia really, really enjoys. If we've got a leaky faucet or something like that, there's a certain amount of societal pressure of like the man has to get in there and fix that. And Sonia's like, no, I just really want to do it. Just get out of the way so that I. And so Sonia takes over that role in our household.
Mm-hmm.
If there's something wrong with the washer or dryer, she's willing to look up a book. She had a Volkswagen for a little while, whatever that red vehicle was.
Her first Volkswagen diesel called Stinky.
Right, and there was Kermit.
Kermit was next, but Stinky I purposely bought knowing that it was going to have a different engine in it. And I knew I was going to be doing most of the fixing, but I wanted Sonia to realize that her car came with some blood. And she helped. She stood and asked questions while I was trying to do something underneath. But that's one of the places where she learned not to be afraid of mechanical things.
Yeah, well, you and her replaced that radiator on the red.
Right.
Well, I don't know if it was a Golf, I think.
That was a Golf. Yeah, it would have been called a Rabbit if they'd stayed with the same name.
Yeah, exactly.
It would have been called Elmo if she'd just forgotten about it.
Oh, well. But yeah, that's definitely something that I see, a trait that you're talking about.
Well, and I don't mean to draw the line with just my parents, though, because I saw farmers making do with all sorts of things. My dad was trying to fix a washing machine that would let little bits of grease out as it did its work. And so little spots of grease would appear. And he was trying to fix the seal, and it was really hard to get the thing apart. And he finally contacted one of the old farmer friends, asked Irvin, what would you do about this? And Irvin says, well, if there's no grease down there, does it still work? And Dad says, well, yeah. I said, well, run it till it breaks. And I don't think he ever fixed it. He ended up living with a little bit of grease now and then.
Yeah, I'm taking the grease is showing up on the clothes then?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But that washing machine did not move to California.
So in talking about your dad, do Do you feel like that this is an intentionally unfair question?
Okay.
Do you feel like you were a better father than your dad?
I don't know. I think I was probably more present in Sonia's life because she and I rode to school together.
Mm-hmm.
And then I made arrangements with the other families that we took kids from two different families to school, and then they alternated bringing the kids home. So I was free to attend faculty meetings after school.
Sure.
But one of the feelings that Sonia has expressed over the years is that even if she wasn't in the same class that I was teaching, which was fifth grade at the time she went through, even though I wasn't teaching the grade she was in at that time, she knew that she could always run down and find me and ask for help or figure something out or whatever. But because I was in the vicinity, life was better. You know, she had a fallback position that she could use. And it probably was true for my dad as well. Because, you know, unless he was off at a convention, which was maybe a week once a year, he was always home. So there was that constancy.
Yeah.
And we both provided it, I think. I don't think we can say one was better than the other.
But there's an old
what,
adage that says that the best ability is availability.
That's true.
Yeah.
Well, and the other thing was, you know, over the course of 20 years of teaching at the same school, I was father to many, many children for a 1 year period, and still have contact with many of those kids today. Those kids are now approaching 50. It's just, I don't know, you keep finding out from people along the way that something I've said or something I did influenced them to do thus and so. And it's like, whoa, had no idea. You know, I was just trying to get through the day and help somebody see a different way of looking at a thing. But then that ends up being their guiding light, and it's like, whoa. And the decision that Kathy and I made in Sonia's first few years was that Kathy would stay home and be mom. And then when Sonia started going to school, Kathy then went back to work. And so Sonia had a pretty consistent home life.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, you guys never moved.
not in her life.
Right.
Right.
And that's something to be said that in at least today's age, where people move constantly.
Yeah.
It's one of the things that I've held on to for my kids is, you know, we've moved, but it's all been along the same road.
Right. Know the neighborhood.
They know the neighborhood, and they've gone to the same schools, and they stayed in the same school district the entire time. So I've been really, really thankful that they've had at least that sort of stability.
Had the synagogue.
In the synagogue, yeah. So, no, there's a lot to be said for that. It really is an unfair question. It's just that you have different requirements and different challenges in your time, and maybe that I guess kind of leads me to my next question. What are the changes that you've seen from being a kid to being a father to now being a grandfather over time? What things remain the same, and what sort of giant changes have you seen in what it means to be a father?
Well, you touched on it already, is the availability. I'd say the main difference was that my parents almost always could say, go out and play. And there was no question about safety, except for, how far from the tree can you fall and not hurt yourself?
Yeah.
And in our playing in the woods, we were in charge of our own self-care. There was nobody around watching to make sure we didn't do anything amazingly stupid. We had to watch out for that. So when we were practicing throwing knives, we were doing it carefully. Or when we were practicing shooting our bows and arrows, and later 22 rifles, we were making sure that we weren't in a sight line to somebody's farm or animals or anything like that. And there was a sense of personal responsibility for the things that we did that were life-threateningly dangerous. And we were aware of the fact that some of these things that we were undertaking were risky, but we were allowed to make our own decisions about that sort of stuff. I don't know how much kids of today actually get out and are unsupervised to take care of themselves. And certainly in the suburbs, you don't have an 18-acre plot of woods to mess around on. And if you do, it would be a managed park of some sort. You wouldn't be allowed to run through there with bows and arrows or a 22 and be plinking at squirrels.
Right.
Although I'm sure there are situations with kids where playing with boats and water and all the things that go along with being on a lake, that's probably still done in those places.
Right.
But I've made the transition from being a country boy to being a city guy now. And that changes a lot of things.
Yeah.
And that's going in a whole different direction. And the electronic gizmos have changed parenting, but I haven't had too much to do with it, except for the fact that I helped introduce the internet to a small part of the world.
Well, yeah, you were a father during the brink of the technological boom.
Right.
And they started putting computers into the schools. And,
you know what the Gopher Network was?
no.
Coming from Minnesota, you don't know about the Gopher Network?
Yeah, no, I'm a bad Minnesotan along with a lot
there
of
was early on in the days of the internet when everything was telnet and you'd actually hook up to a remote computer and you'd be 100% connected to that computer. The University of Minnesota had a filing system called Gopher. You'd gopher information.
Right.
And that was one of the places that we'd call up resources and try to get information from the Gopher Network. But that lasted less than a year. Anyway, I don't want to go into a history of the internet.
So what do you feel like was your biggest challenge as a dad in that era, in the
time. Transition era?
No, just in the time that you were a dad, from the late 70s until the mid 90s, once she moved off to college.
Being available when she needed me. We go back to availability again. There were so many things happening all at the same time, between activities her group of kids that went through school together. There were about a dozen girls that were faculty kids
Okay.
that knew each other all the way through.
Yeah.
And so at any given week or so, there would be a birthday party or something. And all of us parents knew each other because we were all teachers in the school.
So just coordinating and
coordinating
dealing
and,
with life.
and being there. There were some classroom projects at all different levels. I remember trying to build some kind of a water clock in the 3rd grade. Didn't work very well. But trying to come up with solutions to these puzzles that our co-teachers would come up for their kids. And there were field trips and classroom plays and parties and a lot of stuff centered around the school. And because I was driving a group to school, I'd get an earful about things going there. And then during school, we were doing the teaching thing. So, coupling the concentration of the teaching with the parenting, Sonia feeling like Dad was always nearby if needed, but she always had friends and places to be. And when she'd go home, Kathy was there. So there was never a void that we had to work hard to fill.
Right.
So sort of moved right along. I don't know how to typify it.
No, that's really great information.
Yeah.
Thanks. Let's take a break for a bit. And when we come back, we'll go over some rapid fire questions. We're back. We talked about doing some rapid fire questions. This is one of my favorite sections. So you can go into as much depth.
Speed parenting.
Sure.
Sit down.
You can go into as much depth as you want, but the idea is that I'm going to spit questions at you as quickly as we can. So, beverage of choice.
Beer.
Perfect. I already know the answer to this one. Stick or automatic?
Well, I'd love a stick.
That's it. Yeah. If you go to a baseball game, do you prefer to sit on the first base side or the third base side?
I'd want to sit sort of behind the home plate, but leaning toward the first base side.
Alrighty. Have your children seen you cry?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Happy and sad.
Sure.
Yeah.
Who cooks in your household?
Me most of the time. Yeah.
I want to say I'm surprised because I feel like Ella would do quite a bit of cooking.
She does throw together leftovers sort of thing.
Okay.
When she cooks, she'll take the same ingredients and cook them in a way that I've never seen before. But I'm the one who usually puts together some sort of dish.
Usually when I see whenever I see you comment on what you're cooking, it's usually some sort of comfort food, which is, there's nothing wrong with that at all.
I mean, why not be comfortable?
Right. Your favorite tool, being a former carpenter?
Hammer.
Hammer, all right. Last thing you grilled and when?
Burger a couple nights ago.
Very nice, very nice.
Actually, 5 burgers.
5 burgers. Did you eat all 5 burgers?
We had, there was probably between a half and a 3/4 of a pound and made it into 5 little tiny burgers, and so
Oh, some
each one.
sliders, maybe.
Yeah, I guess you call them sliders nowadays. Yeah.
Gas or charcoal?
Well, now it's gas.
What's your preference?
Gas is easier.
What is or was your greatest fear as a father?
Losing the kid, you know, in any imaginable way.
Yeah.
You know, falling off a cliff, getting run into by a car, you know, all sorts of horrible ideas.
Yeah. What is your biggest challenge as a father right now? Seeing that she's already an adult and successful and on her feet and all of those sorts of things. I can't imagine that it's a giant one, but
Don't see the family enough. Yeah, but life goes on. We still have to do Christmas.
that's true. It's April. We'll do
We'll do
little Aprilness or something.
What is it? Alikalaka? What's the?
Kahainio. Let's see.
Melikilikamaka.
There you go. What is your? Let's see here. Electric or a regular razor? I asked the man with the full beard.
Right. Well, I always do this. They don't make what I prefer anymore. Just a 2-edge razor. Don't need to have 3 or 4 or 5 razors. Not electric.
Let's see here. Who are dads that inspire you or did inspire you?
Egan.
For the audience at home, tell me more about Egan.
Egan Bodker was a professor of mine at Grandview College. And he and his wife, Diana, were my surrogate parents while I was at college. And for the most part, I could drop in on them anytime. And so consequently, I became the older brother to their young kids. And they were role models, really neat people.
Well, hopefully we get to get Egan on the show as well.
Oh, good.
Looking forward to that one.
You'll get some good answers.
I think so. Let's see
I
here.
should say that he wasn't the only one. The farmers, the Johanssons, and down in Nebraska, the Jacobsons, and my uncles, and there were just lots of people that took part in forming an image of what a parent should be. Yeah.
Good role models.
Yep.
Best thing that you ever made with your hands?
Oh. Well, there were two houses. The Nescoin house for the Nelsons and the Mountain House for the Brands. The Mountain House for the Brands was the most satisfying because we were given, Dick Shoemaker and I were given carte blanche on a lot of the details, and they always let us do things that ended up being a little more expensive but better. And we ended up with some really nice product.
Nice.
Really neat.
Nice. Favorite book to read as a dad?
Aloud?
No, favorite book to read.
I know, but I mean read it aloud or just read?
Either one.
Oh. Well, the whole Lord of the Rings series, including The Hobbit, is easy to get lost in. And I've gone back to it, I think, 3 times.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's still hands down. The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe was fun, but nowhere near as entrancing as the Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was actually expecting you to say Too Many Daves.
Don't know that book.
No, the poem from Dr. Seuss, Too Many Daves.
Don't know it. I may have read it once.
Oh, it was one that you shared with Kai.
That's right. Well, I would have read it multiple times when I was a student in college, but it's gone away.
Okay.
Green Eggs and Ham is another goodie.
Yeah.
Horton Hears a Who. Dr. Seuss is fun to read to kids.
Yeah.
And was Too Many Daves the one where the Oliver Bolivar Butt figures?
Oliver Butt,
Okay.
yep.
Kai would wait for that line to come, and then when I'd hit it, he'd just go hysterical.
There's a new book writer out who writes similar silly, funny poems. I want to say his name is Chris or James Harris. I'll put it right down here when it comes time. And I've been reading that to Max, and it was actually a book that Kathy gave us.
Oh, good.
And it's just a book of nonsensical sort of poems. And one of them in it is a poem about sneezing. And Max cracks up on that one just about every time. When we first started reading it, she asked me to read it like 7 times in a row. It's great to see it on their face. What advice do you have for other dads out there? What do you want other dads to know? Let's say that you're meeting a dad or someone who's going to be a dad for the first time, and you want to give them some unsolicited advice. What would you say?
Don't be afraid of your children.
That's a good one. That's a really good one.
I think not being afraid to make up an answer. And also not being afraid to say that you don't know. If you're actually communicating in words with the kid, before the child can speak, being in physical contact with the child is really important. Holding the kid and having the child get used to how you smell, because that's something they're going to sense long before almost anything else. But maintaining a presence so that the child knows you. And it's hard because in the early days, the child sort of drifts in and out of consciousness as far as what's around them. They may or may not be actually seeing what's here.
Consciousness or awareness?
Awareness, yeah. Of course, it depends on how much whiskey you feed them.
That's true too.
Sorry.
No, that's all right.
No, advice.
I got a snootful on that one.
Be present and not afraid. Those are two big. And I think they also need to learn the sound of your voice and the fact that it's lower and louder than your wife, probably.
Possibly.
Probably.
Probably.
My laugh would always make babies cry.
Well, you're a grandpa now.
Yeah.
What sort of things do you see with your granddaughter that you saw in your own daughter?
Doing fine.
Doing great. What are the Petersen things that you see in little Maximilia?
I'd say of course, whenever I'm around, it's an exciting time, whether it's me being around or it's just a swirl of people. And so Max is infused with excitability and on the move, and so I don't very often get a chance to see her laid back and relaxed, which I have a couple of times at Kathy's place, where Kathy and I are having a discussion and Max will occupy herself with something that she's doing. But usually it's a desire on her part to include everybody in the room with what she's doing. You know?
Right.
Hey. And that whole thing that I started off with of Sonia always wanting to be there and be with everything going on and not get away from it all. Max has a fair amount of that. She wants to be in the middle of things and see what's going on. And if there's what did they call it? A something pile?
Sister pile.
A sister pile. She wants to be on top, of course.
Yeah.
It's fun.
Let's see here.
Oh, and staying in touch through Facebook or posting pictures or whatever is really important because we can't get back and forth often enough. You know? Yeah, that's neat. That last picture of her staring out at the ocean was precious.
Oh,
I think that weekend? Was Tori took that picture, I think. Or was it you?
It was me.
Yeah. She's getting bigger fast.
Yeah, she is. Super fast. Starts kindergarten this year.
Yes. Now, is that 5 days a week?
It is, and it's full day. It's full day over there. So we were thinking that Kathy would have to do like half days or something like that. And Kathy will probably have her for like maybe a couple of hours at the end of the day.
Wow.
So it'll be a relief for her, but I think a little bit bittersweet too, because I think Kathy was looking forward to half days.
Yeah. But then Max will have kids around her all the time.
Yeah.
That won't hurt her a bit.
No. It'll be great. A little bit of best of both worlds, I think.
Oh, well.
So, with that said, there's just a couple of other things.
Okay.
Let's take a quick break, and we'll cover those two things, and we'll call it good.
All right.
Thank you, sir. Okay, Mark, we're back.
Here we are.
So, last thing we've got to cover is favorite dad joke. And sometimes that's a specific knock-knock joke, or maybe it's more of a tale or something along those lines. But I think what you have in mind is something
it's sort
more,
of
more along the lines of advice.
Yeah, advice. I think no matter where you are in the day or in the week, if you're confronted with a question from a child, you've got to have an answer. You know, you shouldn't be afraid to say, I don't know. But where's the fun in that? You know, so I think you need to have an explanation for almost any physical phenomenon that you can imagine that's available at the drop of a hat, that sounds plausible. And it's what a dad should do to season the children of tomorrow, you know, to make sure that they understand. And so, as an example, we were landscaping around the 5th grade room at the school I worked in, and we were placing rocks around which we would put plants and things like that. And the rocks were anything from, you know, basketball sized up to half the size of a wheelbarrow, but big enough so that you had to have equipment to put them in place. And so we were digging the holes to put the rocks into, and once the rocks got there, we were using heavy bars to get them into the position that we thought was the most artistic and everything. And as we were placing some of the smaller rocks, 1st graders are running by at recess and some of them would stop and say, "What you doing?" Well, here's a perfect moment for a dad explanation. So I would say, "Well, we're planting rocks. You see those big ones over there that have been there for a long time? They used to be this size, and now they've grown up, and so we're placing them to be, to grow into the future." And the kids bought it. And the other time was down along the pathway that went past the shop. One of the maintenance men was trying to find the source of a gas leak along the pipeline that ran right there. This is a small line. And so he was digging around down there, and the kids were running by, and they came back up to the classroom and said, "Well, what's Fred doing down there?" I said, "Oh, he's laying out the beginnings of the new rail line that's going to go a big loop around the campus." "Well, what's that for?" I said, "Well, what we're going to do is teachers have been talking, and we've decided that you're getting worn out by the time you get down to the PE building, so we're going to have a little tram on rails that you just get on, and then it'll run you down to the PE building, and you won't get worn out by the time you're done." And the kids said, "Well, that's stupid." And of course, a lot of them ran down to talk to Fred. Said, "What are you putting in this rail?" And Fred says, "Oh yeah." He didn't have any explanation for me, but he knew the rules of the dad story. And so he says, "Yeah, we're putting in this rail thing so you guys don't have to run down to PE." And a day later, we're in the classroom and everything, and the headmaster of the school comes blasting into the room with papers in hand, says, "Petersen, what is this about a petition to stop the rail going down?" The kids had gotten all lathered up about it and started a petition against the rail set. Perfect dad joke.
Oh my God. It helps to have those improv abilities, that's for sure. I'm just about out. Well, I appreciate you taking the time. Thanks for sharing your multitude of experiences with us.
No. No. This stuff works both ways. I was working in Nebraska. I was early 20s, and no dad in sight. And I'd been given the job of filling up the hog wallow over in the pigsty, or around the pig area. And this was a pig breeder that I was working for at the time. We poured concrete and he kept pigs. And so I was working with a tricycle type tractor with a front end loader, digging up dirt from one spot and dumping it into the mud pool that the hogs like to be in. In the process of doing that, I got the front two wheels down in the hog wallow, and the side of a hog wallow isn't slanted like this, it's concave.
Okay.
So when I'd back up, the wheels had hit that, and because of the shape of the side of the pool, it couldn't come back up again. And the front end loader, when you lowered it down, it was there was no way to push down. No, there was. At any rate, I didn't think about that. So I had a bunch of boards that I'd jammed down to make a ramp to bring the things up, and one of those boards had gotten stuck between the wheels, and of course there's shitty mud everywhere. And I'd been working at this for half an hour trying to get that thing up out of the hog wallow. And my foreman came along, an old guy of 45, and he hardly ever said anything. "Here, he grunted, and he, clutching his cigar, climbs up onto the thing, drops the scoop down and keeps pushing it down, which has the effect of raising the wheels up. And then he just backs up, sliding on the bucket. And I'm standing alongside going, oh, shit. So dad smarts win in this situation.
Yeah. Well, really appreciate the time.
Yep.
Hope to have you again. For our audience at home, there's just one last thing, which is our question of the week. The question this week is there a particular scent that reminds you of your father? For myself, it would be the smell of pipe smoke, or crazy enough, alcohol swabs, because my dad would use that as an astringent on his skin. Is there any particular scent that reminds you of your dad?
Old Sweat and Old Spice mixed together.
All right. Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Well,
an occasional pipe, but not very often.
No.
Yeah.
All right.
His suits always smelled the same.
Well, we appreciate everybody sticking around for the entire episode, and we'll see you soon. Thanks again.
Seriously, I've had to lose some serious hairs asleep because of this perilous pair of trees in the street. Oh, waving goodbye, and everybody's talking about the times of the sign. And now, thank you for the haircut, Sandy's in the days for the trim. Thank you for the haircut, Sandy's in the days for the trim, the trim, the trim. Welcome to my misfit neighborhood. Welcome to my misfit neighborhood. Telephones are shaking my bones, and the motorcycle hounds are compiling our tones. Meet people, places, and things. It's people, places, and things, and it's now.